Joining us today to really show you how easy and rewarding it can be is musician, author, and vice president of information technology at Berklee College of Music, David Nash. So great to have you, David.
Thanks.
What brings you to the West Coast?
Well, I came out for Macworld this last week, and then headed down to NAMM, to Los Angeles for the NAMM
Big
show.
NAMM show is huge, yeah. That's
Toys for big boys.
Toys for... Berklee College of Music is in Boston, one of the most prestigious music schools in the nation. And I think one of the reasons I'm glad to have you on to talk about music and computers is I think there's some thought that maybe it's not real music.
Well, music comes from human beings, and musical instruments are tools that human beings use to make music. So the same kinds of things were actually said about the piano when it was first introduced, because it's you don't actually touch the strings, you don't really make the sounds with your fingers. But in fact, one of the first reviews of the piano said, you know, this horrendous mechanism with these springs and hammers and things.
That's not music. Play the harp.
But the music comes from the person, not from the instrument. The instrument is just the tool. So these are just tools for people to make music.
Does technology enhance for you the notion of making music, learning about music, composing?
Absolutely. You know, when you're a composer, you hear music in your head, and your job is to kind of get it out to the public.
Right.
And in the old days, that is before the technology, you'd basically work with symbols. So you'd write symbols on a piece of paper, and then you'd give those symbols to some other musicians who would then interpret the symbols and make the sound.
And then you finally hear what was in your head.
If you're lucky. And there are many composers who never heard their music performed. Charles Ives, for instance, never heard his music performed.
Really? Because he was so revolutionary that...
couldn't get his music played.
Nobody would play it.
Yeah. But with these tools, you can actually...
That's sad.
Work.
That's so sad.
You can actually work in the medium that you're inventing. I mean, when you think about it, painters, you know, paint on canvas.
And they see it immediately.
And they're working in the medium that their art is going to be expressed in. And so these tools allow us to make music in the medium that we're going to express in with sound.
Now, if I'm an orchestral composer, if I'm doing a symphony, now I guess in the past they played on the piano, write it down, and as you said, you then hear it eventually rendered in all its shades by an orchestra. If I do that on a synthesizer, is that okay? And
It's more than okay. It's great. Because now you can hear it with, maybe it's only a simulation of the sound. Maybe it's not as good as the real orchestra. But you certainly get an idea of what it sounds like while you're working.
Yeah, much better idea.
Absolutely. Because even if you can play it on the piano, and let's face it, not all of us are piano players.
Right.
But even if you're a great piano player, you're only going to hear it with that one sound, the piano sound.
Right.
With this, at least you get an emulation of the strings and the brass section and the woodwinds, etc. So
I see your title is your IT director.
Yep.
But you're a musician first, right?
Yep.
Studied composition at Berklee?
Studied composition, been playing guitar since I was 7 years old, performing. And
I guess at somewhere like Berklee, you'd have to be a musician to be their IT director because they're so intertwined.
Well, and especially where learning is involved. The technology is such a big part of support for learning that it really made a lot of sense for a musician technologist to be in charge of all the technology.
Yeah, I guess so. They use how do they use tech? Give me some examples of how technology is used.
Well, we have about 200 workstations for students to use, like in kind of open labs, where students can go and sit at the computer and a keyboard and do their homework, hear their pieces as they're writing it. Because, you know, when you think about it, when you're a student, part of the hard thing is learning to write things when you really don't know it yet. You haven't really trained your inner ear.
Right.
And so this helps you learn the sounds much, much quicker.
Right.
So we have these labs where students can go. Also, we have classrooms which are outfitted where the teachers can use the computer, tap into the internet, bring sounds. They can play music from our library right in the classroom, and then students can then follow up afterwards.
Now, what I'd like to do, I know you brought some of your equipment. What I'd love it if you could show us how a composer might work with a computer and some instruments to compose some music.
Sure.
Can we do that?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to do that. David Nash is here from the Berklee College of Music, one of the most prestigious music schools in the nation.